From Los Angeles, the home of film and television, this is Film Music Live, a webcast featuring outstanding composers, orchestrators, filmmakers, and more from the world of music for film, television, and video games, talking about their work and answering your questions. Film Music Live is sponsored by the Film Music Network and Film Music Institute. And now the host of Film Music Live, Daniel Schweiger.
Hey everyone, I'm Daniel Schweiger, and welcome to Film Music Live, the show where you get to ask the questions to today's top composers. I'm happy to have you here.
They say that show business will kill you, and any number of comedies from the producers to Ed Wood have satirized what shifty people will connive to make their brand in showbiz. Now in George Gallo's The Comeback Trail, that desperation rides a path that's both hilarious and heartwarming as a bottom-rung filmmaker on his last legs that are about to get broken and worse conspires to collect the insurance that will save him by cashing out a drunken movie cowboy more than ready to take his last roundup. George Gallo, a writer and director who's definitely on the humorous level with the character interplay of hit scripts for Bad Boys and The Whole 10 Yards, and his own films Trapped in Paradise, Double Take, and Local Color, has now gotten his midnight run written friend Robert DeNiro to show his comic chops like never before in the fine company of Tommy Lee Jones and Morgan Freeman. But in a film with no end of unbelievable outrageousness, one big factor that takes things seriously is the terrific Western score by ALDO SHLLAKU. Hailing from an acting family in Albania, SHLLAKU has arrived in Hollywood as a notable indie composer with the particular talent for hyper-stylized action in the likes of Lupin III, The Doorman, and 2 Kill 'Em All films. But now it's The Comeback Trail where he saddles up in spirit with Elmer Bernstein and Alfred Newman to create a truly great widescreen Western score for the movie set shenanigans, delivering rambunctious payback to De Niro's Ed Wood meets Wile E. Coyote while also hearing the redemptive heart of Tommy Lee Jones's not-so-washed-up hero, and most importantly, conveying the team spirit that makes us love the movies. It's along in the coming Comeback Trail that works as both satire and the real cinematic deal, thanks to a collaboration that rides high in the saddle.
And now here to talk about hopping in a particularly hilarious horse is the Comeback Trail writer, director George Gallo, and composer ALDO SHLLAKU. And let's see if Aldo's going to work.
There he is.
Are you there? Oh my God, it worked. This is like the last second of the last second saves we've ever had doing the show. Aldo, you get an award. So it's wonderful to have you here. Well, needless to say, I absolutely love this movie. It's just one of the funniest Hollywood satires I've ever seen. And the score is absolutely terrific. It takes it seriously, but yet it's funny. It works in all the emotional levels and the funny levels you can expect. And again, big thanks to Peter Hackman at Different Direction Management. We've got 5 promo CDs to give out for our first 5 questions. So, George, what really surprised me is this is not the movie's first time at the Roundup. It's actually a remake of a movie that has never been seen. How did you come across The Comeback Trail?
It was in 1974. I was 18 years old. I skipped high school senior year. I went to a comic book convention with all my buddies, and then I left the comic book convention. It was in a hotel on Madison Avenue, and down one of the hallways there was a conference room where I heard a 16 millimeter projector playing, and I popped my head in, and there was a smoky room with about 6, 7, 8 people in it, and they were watching this unfinished movie called The Comeback Trail. That the splices, click, 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 going through the projector, and I stayed there for about 20 minutes. I didn't think that much of the movie, but it was the idea behind it I thought was hilarious. And I searched for decades and decades to try to get the rights, but that was impossible because the movie was never released. I tried it, and all I knew was that it was directed by someone named Harry Hurwitz. And then cut to many, many years later, after essentially almost giving up, I was asked to speak. There was a screening at Phil Rosenthal's house of Midnight Run, and I was asked to do a Q&A at the screening. And as I was going in, this woman comes up to me. She goes, "I just wanted you to know that Midnight Run was my favorite, my husband's favorite movie." I said, "Oh, thank you." I said, "What's your name?" And she said, "Joy Hurwitz." I said, "Are you any relation to Harry Hurwitz?" And she said, "Harry was my husband." I said, "Oh, okay." I said, "What about the Comeback Trail?" She literally took a step back. She said, "The Comeback Trail, like 11 people have seen that movie. How do you know about it?" I said, "I saw it 25, 30 years ago when I was in high school." And then another, we shook hands right then on the spot. And then another 15 years later, we got the movie made.
Wow, and I think total cult addicts would know that Harry Hurwitz made another great movie about movies called The Projectionist.
Well, I love that movie with Chuck McCann.
Yep.
And Rodney Dangerfield.
Yeah, I think it may have been Rodney Dangerfield's first movie.
Yeah.
I mean, Aldo, you've done like a lot of movies before this. I think this might be your first film like this. How did you guys come together on this film?
Well, we had done a few projects before this one, and I do remember George on the previous film before this one that we did. He's like, "I'm writing this story, and you're gonna get your orchestra." That's what I remember. I'm like, "Okay, great." So I read the script, obviously, and hilarious script, and we decided to go with this orchestral, no limits kind of a score, thematic score. And we wanted to play it like it's serious, because these guys are serious in their undertaking, even though it's like kind of too serious at times to try to kill someone on set to collect insurance money. So, but it's all good at the end, so it kind of justified the concept.
So we've got our first question from Ivan over at the Bond Music. In the Comeback Trail, you mixed comedy and dramatic music and added some typical Western sounds. What other movies or music inspired you? For example, I can hear some John Williams, Elmer Bernstein vibes. This question's for both of you.
I mean, Aldo, do you want to answer that? I mean,
no, go ahead, George.
You did all the heavy lifting. All I said was to Aldo is, I think the soul of the movie is that they're making a Western, and that we should use classic, Western themes, like Elmer Bernstein, Magnificent Seven, that type of approach, and have fun with it, because the movie is, when you're making a film, there's all these complexities as to, this is going to be the heart, this is going to be that. But I think the Western center of the picture, that's what they were all doing, had to be played straight. It's not a goofing on a Western, it was true Americana. And Aldo, you take it from there.
Yeah, I mean, we just to add to what George said, because it's like exactly that. I also wanted to have two more blocks in the score, which one was the love theme that Duke Montana has with a black lady, and the other one was actually Max's theme, and that was the toughest one to crack, because we didn't want to make it too slapstick comedy, but at the same time, it is a bit of, he's a Machiavellistic type of a person.
Yeah, it's devious. So,
yeah, so we had to really play with how much is too much and how little is too little. But one thing we knew is that we have to have themes for all of these characters, and we try to stay true to that.
Wow. This is a question for you, George, from Dale. Are there any soundtracks that you like to write to and put together your scripts? I mean, you've written no end of classic films, Midnight Run, Bad Boys, even The Comeback Trail. Were there soundtracks going on while you were writing this?
I mean, I listen to music a lot when I'm writing, and then if I know I'm going to direct it, then I do my best to visualize the movie. I look, again, I like all kinds of filmmaking, but I tend to lean to a more classical approach to making movies, in that I try to tell the story elegantly but simply. And I mean, Aldo and I were talking about this morning. Then there's another school of thought where you have shot after shot after shot after shot after shot, no shot longer than 3 seconds. And that treatment is for anything, it's not an action sequence. It could be a guy sipping a cup of coffee. There's like 63 setups. And I think when you have that kind of busy filmmaking, a strong thematic soundtrack doesn't work, because in more classical storytelling, the camera is more lyrical, and the themes are the editing. In a way, it's telling you, it's helping you feel things, connect with things, and it's taking its time, I think, in a more elegant way. I tend to lean towards that kind of storytelling. I don't want to make it like all busy and stupid for no reason. So yeah, I mean, so Aldo,
Yeah.
save me before I drown in just stupidity. But
I guess, Aldo, for you, the question is, the movie does such a wonderful job of referencing, the tone of, how the West was won, the Magnificent Seven, any of the classic kind of 50s, 60s Westerns. Did you put on stuff for inspiration when you were composing the score for the Comeback Trail?
I was lucky enough on this one to not have anything. I had a blank page, and actually I had the script. I wrote 3 themes. I did the mock-up of those 3 themes. I went on set to see George there and to see what the heck he was doing over there. And I played the 3 themes to George, and I got the feedback was right away, don't change a note.
I loved it. I said, don't change anything. And I was playing it for all the actors. They were ecstatic. I said, hey, this is our soundtrack. And
yeah, so that was actually, to have the director respond that way right away on the themes that I had was like, okay, I think I got this now. And because he was like, to prove the concept. Is this going to work? Is this the vision? Even though we had talked about it, we had read the script many times, many versions and all that stuff. So the 3 themes that you hear in the film, they were exactly note for note what George, the mock-up, basically, the first version. The only one that George hadn't heard on set was Max's theme, because that I left it for the end, because it was a complicated one for me, at least, to find that balance. How much do I want to make him funny, and how much do I want him be dark, and how much do I want to have him this dreamer, and so on. So I left that for the end. And I think that at some point I felt that we kind of cracked the thing, because everything had to work together. All the themes, I wanted to have the 4 themes interchangeable, meaning going from one to the other should feel like part A and part B. It's like the B version of like a development of theme A. And so I wanted to have them work with each other. So
yeah, can I jump in? I mean, look, a lot of people, I think a lot of people, I mean, you were at the screening. That DGA crowd's a tough crowd. And there were about 600 people there, right? And they were howling and laughing. We were, I'm always relieved, because this is an especially difficult needle to thread, in that, it's about a potential murder. Your lead character wants to kill someone to collect insurance money. Yet he's a decent guy in many ways. He's gotten in over his head, and he's desperate. That's the De Niro character. And then at the same time, you have to love Tommy Lee Jones, but he's an asshole. He's drunk. He dumped this woman that he loved. He threw her under a bus for a career because, she's black and he's white. And the studio said in the 1950s, you can't have a black girlfriend, So he threw her. But he wanted redemption. He knew what he had done was completely wrong. And that's why he was such a drunk and such a bitter guy. So, and then Morgan Freeman's a little easier in that he's a killer too, but he loves movies, So it was not the easiest thing to do, to get the tone right. And sometimes, when I was shooting it, I kept saying, is this all going to work? Because it's tonally, it's, you have to feel for Tommy Lee Jones in the romance. And at the same time, in the same movie, you have to believe that there's a horse that whenever it hears the word rhubarb, starts kicking around at people. So it's like the Three Stooges, but it's got a lot of heart at the center of it. And it's not an easy, like I say, needle to thread. But, Aldo saved the day, because he gave it, let's say, a beautiful balance, a center, where it all it all hangs together with the music.
Right. I mean, I have to really give you props, George. I mean, I was at the DGA screening, and this movie is so beautifully shot for the widescreen. I mean, it's streaming; you can watch this streaming in all the services now. But again, it's so well composed.
Thanks. Thank you for noticing, because
yeah,
because by today's standards, some people don't get it. It's such a throwback to John Ford and old school filmmaking, where there wasn't cutting. And if you wanted to make a cut, someone would walk into a close-up and say something and then leave frame as somebody else. What Spielberg does a lot. Then walks in, says something, you have a two-shot, another person walks into a close-up. So in a way, it's its own form of cutting. John Frankenheimer used to do that a lot. I tend to like that stuff a lot, because all this stuff, to me, it becomes a lot of noise, but the people that get it really get it, which is nice.
Yeah, and Aldo, I just have to compliment you on how good this score. It sounds terrific. I mean, when you were scoring, when you're composing, did you kind of see the widescreen in your head in terms of getting that kind of big resonance sound?
The change for me was once I went to the set. And that's when I really realized, because I did not know what the scope was, how big it was going to be, how it's going to be shot and all that stuff. I knew that, there's a Western element to it, but I had no idea that George was going to go really Western on this thing. So when I went on set, I'm like, okay, that's it. That's no more limits now. Let me just write the score and really go and have fun with it. The love theme actually was one of the most important things to write also, because it's what keeps this whole thing grounded. The love theme between Tommy Lee Jones and Cheryl, and so once I had that one, it started to make sense, the whole concept. Of course, the orchestra played a huge role. That sound,
they were fantastic, right, Aldo?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say that the sound that we hear there, it's actually this Berlin orchestra. They did an amazing job. When they play, you feel it. You really feel it, and the brass is impeccable. I'm a brass player myself, so I was like, okay, we got it. So.
Yeah, no, it sounds just terrific. But again, this movie it's got kind of Get Shorty-esque jazz in it, and the movie starts off really funny with this whole kind of killer revenge nun thing, which is like a fake. I love fake trailers in movies, and this is really, really funny. That gets us into this kind of pathetic, super low rent stuff that De Niro's character is doing. Tell me about shooting the fake trailer and scoring the fake trailer.
Oh, the shooting the fake trailer. I mean, that I could do an hour on that. We shot the fake trailer in one day. We shot it up in Bakersfield. I'm going to refrain from telling exactly how we did it, but I'll tell you someday, like over a few glasses of wine. Okay, but we were in a location that, I'll tell you this much: we were in a location that was at some museum where there was a tour going on, and then we had like 7 supermodels in thongs and nun stuff and machine guns taking breaks, and there'd be these very sweet middle American folks walking through this museum of the West, and we were shooting in this little chapel. They'd come out and have a cigarette or whatever, and people are like, what the F is this? It was what kind of movie are they making in there? So, but we shot that in one day. That was a good time. And then Aldo, take it away with the music.
Yeah, I saw the kind of small clips of this thing, and then I heard George doing the narration of these trailers, because in the movie you have George making the narration of these posters and so on. I thought it was hilarious, and I'm like, you know what, we're gonna go 70s funk, just to have fun with it. George was having fun. I wanted to have fun too, so I showed George the piece actually only on the piano, because I didn't want to pay musicians. We had the budget set for the orchestra. George's like, yeah, I like it. So, and then of course we went to Nashville, recorded it, and they nailed it big time. And it's what's in the movie.
I love all that 70s funk stuff too. Aldo knows I played saxophone in a 70s funk band I couldn't figure out what I wanted to be when I grow up, so I dabbled in music for a while, and but all that like Herbie Hancock stuff, and remember Herbie Hancock Headhunters? I loved all that shit. So it was sort of a bout of that. Can I say one thing as I switch gum about Robert De Niro? What's great about Robert De Niro, and I think it came out in the music, he knew right away when I was talking, and he likes directing. He doesn't like a lot of baloney. So I was talking to him, and he goes, "I'm playing Wile E. Coyote," he said to me. I said, "Yeah, that's what you're doing." And then I'd start talking about Wile E. Coyote. And as I said at the screening, this is the guy that did Taxi Driver and The Deer Hunter and, The Irishman, Goodfellas. He loves Wile E. Coyote. I would start talking about, he goes, "Is that the one with the ball bearings, or is that the one where he's trying to build the rocket ship?"
Yeah.
I mean, he knows them inside out, so he definitely got what I was going for.
It's really a road runner cartoon. But what's interesting about the score, Aldo, is that for the most part, it could have really kind of played cartoon music, but it really doesn't. It's kind of playing the movie, but not the kind of the setup of Robert De Niro getting hit by the bull or Tommy Lee Jones flying off the bridge. The score could have been a lot more kind of Mickey Mousey, but it isn't.
Yeah, we try to stay out of it because I wanted the humor to be on the script, on the dialogue. And actually, George has done such an amazing job with the script. Script is hilarious. You have to hear every word, and every word is very funny, and it has depth because it has a reference to something in the movies. And George starts the movie with a conversation between De Niro and Zach Braff talking about how when Stravinsky had Rite of Springs in Paris played, and there was a fist fight and all that stuff. I mean, you don't get to write a score to this type of a movie too often when the director is like really, into music and gives you the free reign to do whatever I needed to do. So it was like one of those moments where you're like, okay, let them be funny. I'm just gonna be there, have my themes orchestrated in a certain way, so it's like borderline acceptable when it comes to how much do we do the humor in the music. I try to stay out of it actually, because over time the music does start sounding humoristic once you hear the themes a couple of times. And you have the
You have
bassoon.
the repetition of some of it. Like every time
Exactly.
De Niro does something effed up, it's
You have the dark.
I mean, it's like you can hear his wheels turning.
So it was more on the.
And I have to say one other thing.
orchestration.
I co-wrote the screenplay with Josh Posner. I have to give him credit. So, because I know he's going to watch this, and I don't want to hear it later.
So we've got a question from Louis Versalini. Now, The Comeback Trail is essentially a movie within a movie. What was your approach to scoring it? And let's talk about the actual movie they're shooting. What is the sound of that movie?
Well, yeah, it was the funk for the nuns, basically, right? And exactly. This question actually was a tough one because we were like, okay, do we do the movie they're shooting as a completely separate one? And then we only dealt with that question when it came to the nuns. The nuns, when they start in the church, we do have this organ, we do have this choir that is singing in Latin, and then once we get out of in real life, basically, then we go into the score. But there is a moment in the middle of the movie when Zach Braff shows all the characters the film being played on the big screen there with the projector. It was a sound design decision to have the score of the film sounding like it's coming from the projector, and then all of a sudden toward the end we just bring it to the forefront, like it becomes now the score of the film, not source anymore. So we played with that mostly, and not necessarily let's have a different score for the film in there and then the different score for the movie, and then it would have been way too complicated to have the cohesiveness of the whole thing. We stuck with the themes, and I think that it does keep it together because you have these themes that you kind of identify situations or characters through them. So that was the approach.
The movie essentially, I just love that Robert De Niro gets to play like these kind of really sleazy producers you can imagine himself working with at the very start of his career. So
he did. He did. In fact, when I gave him the script, because it wasn't given to him with an offer, it was given to him as a friend to a friend. And he read it and he called me 2 days later. He goes, George, this thing's effing hysterical. I went, thank you. And he knew a lot of the guys that I was mocking in the script because we were both from New York. He's a few years older than me, but he knew all of those guys. He started laughing just thinking about them. And that line that Aldo referenced where he's talking about Stravinsky at the beginning of the movie, The Rite of Spring, that was based on a guy. I don't want to mention his name because I really liked him, but he made the world's worst movies. But he fashioned himself as an artist because one minute he'd be talking about Buñuel and all of this nonsense. And he made, can I curse?
Go for it.
He made titty movies. He just made the worst movies on earth, giving a woman an excuse to take her top off constantly. And he made the worst movies in the world. But he would talk like, we start talking about Truffaut and Godard. And I'm like, what are you talking about? But he had to believe that stuff in order to continue, I imagine. So, but Bob caught it right away because I know who that is. I went, yeah, that's so-and-so. And he went, that's why he was interested in playing the guy,
I mean, Aldo, it's taken you probably a bit to get to where you are. Do you have any fun memories of working with any really sleazy exploitation dudes in your career that maybe have influenced the score?
Well, look.
What makes you think we've stopped?
Look, I'm not from here, so I'm a newcomer, and for some reason I would take any type of weird situation as the normal because okay, this is how they do business here, this is how they function, this is how. So it's been kind of an acceptance of any type of situation. So focus on the music, and that's pretty much it. But no, to write the score was. I wanted to play Max because, as I mentioned in the beginning, it was the toughest theme to crack because I didn't want to do Mickey Mousing and slapstick comedy stuff. So, but I saw him as a dreamer. I saw him as the guy's gonna do anything that he wants to do for his art, and I wanted to really give him a sound. And the Stravinsky thing that George mentioned in the beginning, I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna have him on a bassoon. So, and then of course it becomes bigger and bigger, and then the whole orchestra plays his theme. But that was the idea, to just have these little threads that George talks about Stravinsky. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna orchestrate his theme a little bit like Stravinsky and play with these little subconscious kind of decisions and have fun with it. And that's how I approached it. So situations, of course, we have a lot of situations, but I don't think it's good for for this podcast.
No.
I told you that at one point our financing fell out. Did I mention that?
No, I mean,
in the middle of shooting,
it's taken you 5 years to get this out.
Yeah, well, in the middle of shooting, some financing fell out, and there was some question as to whether or not we were going to finish the movie. Two of the producers ran out and found the money, in about a 5-day period, which was remarkable. I don't know how they did it, but in that 5 days, it's amazing how quickly we turned into everything we were mocking. We were so desperate. I was like, all right, we'll do that, and we'll do this. And I was like, my God, we sound like the people in this movie. It's everyone's an inch away from becoming Max Barber, I think, in reality.
What to you is the point in the film where it just kind of turns into becoming something more emotionally real?
I think when Duke goes back to visit the love of his life, we hint at it a few times earlier on. He goes to the house and she's not there, or she's hiding, basically. But when he goes back and you see this guy that you've been kind of laughing at, you suddenly he breaks your heart. And Tommy Lee Jones is so good in that scene with Cheryl Lee Ralph. She's so good, and they're so good together, and you believe that they did have something wonderful many, many years ago, which she has learned to let go. I mean, she's still angry, but she's learned to let go, and he hasn't let go of it. And his sort of desperation to get her to understand that he knows it's the worst decision he ever made. I think that's where the movie starts to get more real, and Aldo's theme, that when he finally breaks down and says, Bess, I think you've done better than I have, and that's the cue to that. I mean, again, that beautiful theme that Aldo wrote. It's hard not to start crying when you hear it and you see Tommy Lee's eyes at that moment. That's to me when the movie really go, oh man, this movie's really got a heart at the center of it.
No, it's really good. Now we have a new question here from John Walker. Now, since George you've also got a background in music, was the conversation between you about the music or the needs of the story?
We talk more about the needs of the story, I would say. I mean, I don't go major, minor, major. But that's what Aldo does. I would talk about the story, and I would talk about movie references, or I would talk about things that moved me. We talked about Aaron Copland somewhat, right? Because I love Copland. I love Aaron Copland. It's hard for me to get through Appalachian Spring or the Tenderland Suite without getting choked up. It's so simple and so heartfelt, that music, to me. So, and it connects to a kind of Americana that I think is really a beautiful notion, but that's kind of all that I do, and I talk about what things mean to me and the characters, but Aldo has to, I don't like filling people's heads up with too much garbage if I can help it. I sometimes find, like the same thing with directing actors, you start giving them too much, all you do is confuse them. I try to give people very simple notes,
Direction that
and you rely on them to do it,
Yeah, look, I've been blessed to have met George, and we've done now 4 or 5 films together. And because I can tell you a little example, what George told me about this movie is like, what? We're talking about characters and all that stuff. And he says, what? We should start this movie with an overture. Forget the movie. You start with like a 5-minute overture, old school, and you have the music, and that's it. And have the people get into the movie, and then we start the movie. And I'm like, what the heck? This is like, like a blessing to be put in this kind of position for a composer to, we discussed it. We start laughing because, of course, today people have no patience or anything like that. But that overture was actually written, and it's the end credits of the film. So, which was a tribute to a little bit of, if you hear the end credits, actually, it's exactly that type of a form that goes a bit from the theme to theme, from everything. So you basically present all your thematic material to put people into that mode. So I wrote it, we recorded it, and it was used as an end credits because obviously nobody's going to sit in a theater today 6 minutes, to listen to music. We know that.
Yeah, and if it got a theatrical release, you'd have to sit through 40 minutes of trailers, all of them looking exactly the same. He knew too much. And then what? Then you're going to kill them with 5 minutes of Western music, and then start the movie. So anyway.
But I was very, very lucky. I'm to have a director that sits down and talks about music and about what needs to be done and in specific terms and whatnot. So it's not like, I want my music to sound like that, or how about I tempt the whole movie, the rough cut with this, or here's what I want. This is non-existent between George and I, because we've done, as I mentioned, 4 or 5 films, and it's been the same approach. And it's easier for me as a composer to really search as a creator what needs to be done for this film when you have this openness, this freedom of creation, and George really gives it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like to be boxed in, if I'm making a movie. That's why I make independent movies. I made a lot of studio movies, and after a while I couldn't stand it because I can screw up a movie by myself. I don't need their help, and I lost interest in it because it'd be note after note after note after note, and they kill the spirit of what you're doing. So I went the more indie route. It's more difficult, but it's far more rewarding. I always think about what John Sayles said. He said, if you make an independent movie, you have the gift of doing it exactly the way you want to. And unfortunately, no one will ever get to see it. But but in this case, we're streaming everywhere. So in this case, we're blessed.
What to you is like the standalone gag of all the kind of Wile E. Coyote Roadrunner moments in this film? What was like the most important for you, the hardest or the easiest to score from both of you guys?
I mean, the one that I had the most fun shooting probably was that bridge sequence. And then when Tommy Lee, I don't want to give too much of the movie away, but I mean, I can, right? I mean, people are going to see it, right? Or the, you know, when Tommy Lee survives something that's not survivable, and the audience starts cheering that this old man is pulling himself up on this rope. I mean, the whole theater went nuts. And I've seen it a couple times now with a big audience, and they just love that moment. And that ba da 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 da, he's pulling himself da 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 ba 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 da, you know, it's and then when he gets to the top, the theme comes in. It's just great. It just, and the audience cheers, and you know, anyway. I'll bet I was in key.
Oh, you are in key, and I can't believe that. You see, Daniel, this is what I have to deal with, a director that sings every theme. So for me, actually, one of the funniest moments for me in the movie is actually when they finally go to the bull, and when you see that bull, you know.
Oh yeah, that was great.
And I'm like, you know what, I'm really gonna go for the Spanish colors and all that stuff, because it's talking about, you know, 7 generations of toreadors of this and that. It's so hilarious. Then they're talking about a bull, you know, so the stakes are being raised slowly.
You know,
slowly,
his
and then
great grandfather was Jose
Yeah.
Greco, whatever. I forgot what it was. It's so ridiculous.
Yeah, and then you see the kid with the red hat, and you're like, oh shit, what now? You know, so that's why the acoustic, the flamenco color guitar and all that stuff. So that one I really enjoyed it.
Now, George, when you were writing Morgan Freeman's character, you know, he's a guy who's always referencing movies. Do you ever find, like, just as a director, when you start talking to these like incredible actors, that they're movie fans?
Oh yeah, the older guys are certainly movie fans. I mean, Morgan, you know, Morgan knew every reference, and he added the line. He improvised when he said, I'll push you down the stairs like Richard Widmark did that old Bat and Kiss of Death.
I love that.
Right, which a lot of people don't know what the hell that is. And then Morgan says, "You remember Tommy Udo?" You know, he added that because he look, those guys are true movie historians. You know, Bob De Niro is, Morgan Freeman is, Tommy Lee Jones knew the most obscure Westerns ever made. So when you're working with guys like that, it's really a treat, because I find sometimes, you know, you work with younger people, they don't know what you're talking about. And I wonder, Aldo, we're talking about this morning, I wonder how they can watch a movie. They're missing every reference, you know? I mean, you have to have some sense of history, you know, in order to engage in things, because everything is built on the things that came before you, you know. I'm not a big believer in movie making starts today with me. You know, I mean, that's absurd. No, it's 100 years of history. It's thousands of years of storytelling, going back to Greek myths and stories being told around campfires. This is just, you know, a modern version of that. That's all this is. But to not know all those references and where it all came from is insanity to me. I don't. But how do you watch anything? How do you connect with anything?
I mean, Aldo is a kid growing up in Albania and watching movies there. Did Westerns at all play any kind of part in you wanting to be a composer?
Actually, no, because all foreign television was forbidden, was prohibited under communism. You only would watch the national television that had propaganda in different forms. Even of course, the news was propaganda, but even theater, music, movies, everything was in the functioning of the communist propaganda stuff. but we would get illegally some channels like Rai Uno, the Italian stuff, and so on. And that's why my all-time film composer was Morricone, because he had done so many of these Italian TV movies that that's what we were hearing. And then obviously, slowly, when you would get a chance to watch, The Magnificent Seven or some Bart Lancaster stuff, or these kind of films, then the Once Upon a Time in America, again Morricone. So that was my sound. But then once I left Albania, of course, I opened up. I was like eager to hear and to see movies. Like I would go to the movie theater and watch like 6 films in a row. And then of course Jerry Goldsmith was my second all-time composer, and that's when I started getting that sound. But obviously Steiner, Korngold, the founders of the film scoring craft, those are basically that's the sonority that I kind of gravitate towards more than the modern the drone stuff, the one button down and let it go. And there is room for that too, obviously. But if I had to pick one, I would say that what I mentioned is a bit more interesting to me as a composer.
Yeah, and one thing I love about the film is it's a period movie, and George, you kind of came of age in the early '70s in a way, creatively, transitioning from being a painter, which is in your lovely film Local Cult, just a wonderful film, great score by Chris Boardman, into this. I mean, you were kind of in the sea change when orchestral soundtracks were kind of going away, and it was all this kind of rock and roll stuff,
Yeah, I mean, listen, there was a period in the '70s where there was little to no music sometimes in movies. There was there was a kind of an embracing, I think, of a kind of like if you think of Dog Day Afternoon or certain movies in this that have no music in them at all, it just sounds, the sounds of the city and stuff, but yeah, it's a movie. If you think about it, it's a movie about making a movie. It's a movie about filmmakers. It's a movie about a time, and the first decision, I guess, and again, this plays to the score in that we weren't mocking anything. We were having fun with something, but we weren't mocking it. And, when I said to myself, okay, I'm getting ready to make this film, I didn't watch any movies of the present. I went back to the '70s and I rewatched, I'd say at least 30 films that I liked very much of that time. And they were all shot and handled in a similar manner because MTV had not yet been invented. The more quick cutting styles of the present, were not invented yet. And so I said, all right, I'm going to tell this story like it's not only taking place in the '70s, but we're making it in the '70s. I'm not going to comment on the time. I'm not going to mock the time. The time was what the time was. And I'm going to shoot it from that perspective, which of course then helps Aldo because Aldo is not making fun of it either. Aldo is commenting on what's going on in the scenes, not like we're making a comment on the time, if that makes any sense.
What's really interesting about and I'd love to see the original movie, is that the
composer, no, you don't.
Okay, maybe not. But it was interesting because the composer was Ego Cantor of the original film, and he was a producer as well, and kind of put together these kind of super low budget movie packages at the same time. So he was again part of the kind of, it's almost self-reflexive in a way, because the original was made by like super low budget guys, definitely I think doing maybe better films than De Niro's character. But there's kind of like a whole kind of circular weird thing, about these two movies. I mean, personally, I'd love to see a 4K release that would have the original as a bonus or something like that.
Well,
be interesting.
There's no finished version of it. That's the problem. There are like 6 versions of it because when I finally, Joy Hurwitz and I got very, very close, and she ended up producing the movie with my wife and Richie Salvatore, Dave Ornston. we watched various versions of it, and she knows it too. One's worse than the next.
Oh no.
And, oh yeah, and like I say, Harry did some very interesting work in his life, but I think they had an idea, and they just never had a script, and they just would say, hey, let's go shoot this weekend, let's make some shit up, and that's good for like 5 minutes of time, but you get into 100 minutes and you don't know where you're going. That's rough, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that there's some stuff in one version I saw where they're supposed to be in like in Arizona. It's so clearly Central Park. You know, and at one point I was thinking of doing something like that, you know, but it's, you know, I mean, like, you know, they're right near where all the horses and the carriages are. They're right. You could, you know, and they shot it in the dead of winter. You could hear the traffic in the background. They're supposed to be out in the desert. I mean, there's some funny shit in that movie, but kind of funny for the wrong reason, you know, but.
Well, I mean, hey, you know, you fake out. Oh my God, now my mind is going. But the wonderful Lone Pine, which is the best movie museum ever. So if you're going for some reason to go skiing in Mammoth, stop at Lone Pine, go to that movie museum. Because
I know Lone Pine very well because as a painter, I love painting in that area. I've done a lot. There's your cat. What's your cat's name?
Sierra.
Oh, Sierra. There you go, Lone Pine. It's right at the base of the Sierra Mountains.
But you did a pretty funny job of faking that out in I think New Mexico is where you shot.
Yeah, we went to New Mexico for that. We shot on the Western Street. Actually, sadly, it's the same street where the cinematographer was killed in that church. Yeah.
Yeah, Rust. Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So I guess as we're going to start wrapping up,
we are, I
guess. But what makes a collaboration like yours? How you know that really lasts a couple? You know, what are the other movies you've done together? I mean, what makes this collaboration?
Well, there's a couple I'd like to forget about. You know, I to be honest, but I mean, the Comeback Trail I think is our best work. You know, the other movies we did were more like jobs where people approached me and said, "Do you want to make this movie?" Right, Aldo? And
well, yeah, I mean, look, this is your script. You're involved like 100% in this, but Poison Rose we did together, Ritual Killer, Vanquish. So each one of these, I mean, Ritual Killer, I mean, the ending is like holy cannoli. I mean, that's a side of you, George, that I could not see coming.
Well, that was Cole Hauser's idea where he eats the guy's eyeballs. Yeah.
Oh boy, this is
yeah.
like, shit.
You know, look, you know, it's funny, like, you know, Ritual Killer, I tell you the truth, I didn't want to do it. And Aldo knows this story. I says, I don't do this shit. I don't want to do this, you know. And they had a kind of a half-baked script, and you know, and William Friedkin, who was a very close friend, was still alive. And I called him up. I said, Billy, they're offering this movie, and Morgan Freeman's a friend of mine, so I want to do it because of him. And I really like this guy Cole Hauser. I said, but I don't know about this. He goes, George, what's it about? I went, well, you know, it's about the kidnapping of children and they eat the body parts. He's like, oh, this sounds wonderful. Why don't you want to do this? You know, Billy was nuts. I mean, I loved every conversation I ever had with him. But he said to me, he goes, George, just keep it open-ended, because I've been cruising. I've watched 10 times. I'm still not sure what it's about. And he goes, keep it open-ended. And remember that the end of the movie doesn't know that it's the end of the movie. And I went, all right, that's interesting. You know, I'll try that. Let me see. I'll explore that, because you know, why pass up an opportunity? Now, I mean, is it a perfect movie? No. I mean, we have limits making it, but I learned something. I'm always learning. Hopefully you keep learning as you do this, you know.
Well,
and Aldo did a great job with that theme, you know, that
but George, what I know now is that you are not afraid in going from, let's say, a noir film to a kind of a horror thriller thing to a complete comedy on Comeback Trail. So that's like inspiring to see. Okay, let's attack this genre and let's go for it. So regardless of.
Yeah, and what are they going to say? You suck? They're going to say that anyway. So who cares? It's like I stopped worrying about critics and reviews like 30 years ago. I don't care. I mean, I can't listen. If somebody once said to me, "Okay, you're jammed up on a scene and it's not working. You've got two phone numbers. One is Martin Scorsese's and the other is the critic for the New York Times. Who are you going to call to help you get out of that jam?" I'd probably call Scorsese, right? So anyway, I rest my case.
Well, I will, and I just have to say, George, you showed me a script like when we worked on Double Team a couple of decades ago. It's like Galaxy Quest worthy script called Friends Again, where essentially William Shatner is kidnapped by his loser friend and forced to make a Star Trek movie in his garage.
Yes.
It's so funny. Someone
Thank
make
you.
this movie.
I have been trying to make that for 30 years or 25 years or however long I wrote it. There might be interest in it again. I mean, it's another movie about making a movie, but I love the idea of these guys that never went to Hollywood. They're like, I mean, they're like what, 60 years old, still living with their moms, and they suddenly, this is my last chance to do something great, and they go do this kidnapping, so.
Although this could be your chance for a science fiction score,
Yeah, get out the theremin. That's all I want to tell you.
So, but before that happens, what's next for you guys?
I got a couple of films that are, one of the Friends Again seems to have some interest again. I wrote another script called The Accidental Gangster that I love, that might be hitting the fast track, and a couple of things. And obviously anything I do, Aldo hopefully will work with me if I'm lucky enough to have him again. Please, Aldo.
It would be my pleasure, George. Of course. I finished Kill Them All 2, which is like a sequel to the first one I had done a few years back. Also, we did an animation feature that is not out yet. I don't know when they're releasing it, but that was fun too, because it's one of the only films that my kids can actually watch. So they have never watched a movie that I've worked on because they're all PG-13 and up. But yeah, so that's pretty much it for now.
Well, Aldo and George, the show was truly a cliffhanger. We saved it right as the bridge was falling down. Thank you both for coming
Aldo
down.
through the rope. Aldo through the rope.
Aldo climbed up, man. Thank you so much, both of you guys, for joining Film Music Live. I want you all to watch The Comeback Trail. It's on such streaming services as Apple. It's everywhere. Stream it. And I guess it's coming out in Paramount Plus pretty soon.
Yeah, I think June.
Yeah, we'll check it out when it hits there. Aldo's score is available digitally on Node Records. So I want to give a big thanks to Peter Hackman at Different Direction Management. Julie, your awesome wife. Our show producer, Dale Turner, executive producer, Mark Northam, and graphic designer, Mark Banning. And I'll be seeing you all on the next episode of Film Music Live.
Thank
you, Daniel.